This presentation is a short overview of Chapter 13, Grouping Data. I will cover why do we group data, and the group by clause, and some restrictions that apply to the grouping of data. When we ask the database system through the submission of a query to group rows on column values or expressions, it forms subsets of rows based on matching values. Then the database can calculate aggregate values on each of these groups. When you add a group by clause, you specify the columns in the logical table formed by the form and where clauses. Very important. The columns must be in the from or the where clause. This is the syntax diagram of the select statement with which we are familiar. We've been using this syntax throughout the semester. What is new, at the very bottom here, we see the group by clause, which is positioned after the where clause. Let's walk through a few examples. The query is, show me for each entertainment group the group name, the count of contracts for the group, the total price of all the contracts, the lowest contract price, the highest contract price, and the average price of all the contracts. So we see we do have a few aggregations here. Sum for the total price, min for the lowest contract price, max for the highest contract price, and average for the average price of all contracts. Our data model consists of these two tables, entertainers and engagements. This is our select statement. We see the first column is entertainer stage name. And notice entertainer stage name is in the group by clause. Why? Because it's not part of an aggregation. So since it's not part of an aggregation, it must be in the group by clause. So the rows are grouped by entertainer stage name, and that grouping is counted, summed, min, max, and average on these columns that you see in the parentheses. Count on entertainer ID, sum of contract price, min of contract price, max of contract price, and average of contract price. Example 2. Show me for each customer the customer first and last names, the count of contracts for the customer, the total price of all the contracts, the lowest contract price, the highest contract price, and the average price of all the contracts. Very similar to example 1, same tables in the data model, but notice we have customer last name and customer first name in the select clause instead of entertainer stage name. So instead of one column in the select clause that's not aggregated, we have two. Therefore, in the group by clause, we have two columns, customer last name and customer first name. For example 3, we will have a subquery and the group by will be within the subquery. The request, display the engagement contract whose price is greater than the sum of all contracts for any other customer. So we see here we will need a subquery to calculate the sum of all contracts for any other customer. The same data model, two tables, customers and engagements. This is our select statement. Notice in the where clause, we have contract price greater than all, and then our subquery, which is returning the sum of contract price. It includes a group by clause on customer ID. The data is grouped by customer ID. The aggregation is the sum on contract price. This is a condition. in the where clause of the outer or main query. Notice there is no group by in the outer or main query. Let's look at some restrictions when using the group by clause. One of the most common mistakes is to assume that you can reference columns in non-aggregate expressions as long as the columns come from unique rows. That is a false assumption. Let's look at this request. Display the customer ID, customer name, and the total. So we have an aggregation here. The aggregate is sum, and the total of all engagement contract prices. Notice our select statement. We have a group by clause. We're grouping by customer ID. And we have a column total price, which is the summation of contract price. But we also have a third column in the select statement or select clause, which is customer full name. This SQL statement will fail because it includes columns in the select clause that are not in an aggregate function and are also not in the group by clause. What are those columns? It is customer first name concatenated with customer last name with the alias customer full name. Customer full name has to be in the group by clause for this to work. Notice I put the entire concatenation in the group by clause. That is a requirement. I could not just put customer full name. A common mistake is to attempt to group on the expression you create in the select clause rather than on the individual columns. Remember that the group by clause must refer to columns created by the from clause or by the where clause. It cannot use an expression that you create in your select clause. Now notice here with this select statement, we have customer full name and customer full address in the select clause. They are required to be in the group by clause because they are not aggregated. We have two aggregations in the select clause, max and sum. Those two aggregations cannot be in the group by clause. That is what we are saying here with this first sentence. One of the most common mistakes is to attempt to group on the expression you create in the select clause rather than on the individual columns. In this select statement, the individual columns are customer full name and customer full address. In this select statement, the expression created in the select clause is the max aggregation and the sum aggregation. They cannot be part of the group by clause. But in the from clause, we have a subquery with the alias CE. Notice it is referred to in the group by clause. That is okay because the subquery is in the from clause. I have covered why we group data essentially so that we can perform aggregations on the group data. I've covered the group by clause and the restrictions that apply to the group by clause. Your assignment this week is the Chapter 13 quiz and the Chapter 13 lab.